Hi, this is Joe Lawrence, and in this presentation, we're going to discuss some considerations related to land use and how that impacts our economy. So agriculture is the, number one economic engine of Lewis County and has been for a long time. But it's a very land intensive industry. We require a lot of acres to support primarily our dairy cows, which are the biggest part of our agricultural industry. And Uh, one thing with agricultural land is it tends to be uh, good quality land. It's already been cleared. It's usually relatively flat and accessible. And when we think about that, that makes it good land to be developed. So oftentimes, some of our best agricultural land also has the most significant development pressure. And that's certainly the case when we think about the current interest in solar development. We also have to understand that land is definitely a finite resource and that not all land is created equal. So not only do we have to think about um, if we want land taken out of agriculture for other uses, but also which agricultural lands make the most sense to develop in other ways and which ones benefit us the most to stay in agriculture. So this map was generated by Lewis County and the Soil and Water Conservation District, and it shows the tillable farmland in the county, and we immediately notice it's mostly concentrated in the Black River Valley. And it's interesting that with dairy being one of our, or the biggest form of agriculture in the county, that really the land used for it is a relatively small percentage of the total land that encompasses the county. So it already gives you an idea of the limited resources we have for this industry. And there's also definite differences in soil quality as highlighted in this map. And we can see that the green, the highest quality soils are really concentrated in the Black River Valley. And soil type and land productivity has a direct impact on the cost of production, the competitiveness of that farm business, and also environmental sustainability. Because when we can utilize our more productive land, it decreases the overall footprint of producing food. So when we think about in terms of dairy cows, we need to grow crops to support those cows. So we can think about it in terms of an acre of land needed to support a dairy cow versus that acre being used for something else. And we often use an economic multiplier uh, from a study at Cornell that shows that there's $2.29 generated in the economy for each dollar of gross milk sales on a farm. So that can add up pretty quickly, as we'll show you in a minute. And really, when we think about taking land out of agriculture for any purpose, we should be thinking about answering the following question. Will that new land use generate equivalent or greater economic impact per acre than if we were supporting a dairy cow? Now, to get at that, we put together a little spreadsheet, and you can see the website here where this is available if you want to play around with it yourself. And I'm going to try to switch my screen and give a little example here. So here we have this calculator. The values in the green with the gray background are ones that you can change. And there's also a whole bunch of notes and references related to the information here. Now, we talked about that multiplier of $2.29, but we have to translate that from a per cow basis to a per acre basis. So we start out with an assumption on milk production, and here we use 75 pounds per cow, which is probably a reasonable average, though we certainly know that many farms are exceeding that today. And for a lot of farms in our area, you could easily put 80 or 85 pounds per cow in there. Milk price certainly fluctuates quite a bit, but we could use 19 as a relatively reasonable value for recent years. Now, acres needed per cow is a big one related to that land productivity, because we often think about 2 acres needed to support a cow and her replacement. However, if we have lower productivity land, this number could go up. And as this number goes up and it takes more acres of less productive land to support that same cow, our economic impact per acre goes down. So we see in this example here, using that 2.29 multiplier, that um, every acre that's supporting a dairy cow is generating approximately $5,900 in the local economy. However, if we were forced to use our less productive farmland and we up this number to 4, we can see that that nearly cuts that, or pretty much cuts that in half, right? And so as we use less productive land, not only are farms less competitive because their cost of production goes up and they're less environmentally sustainable, they also have less of a positive impact per acre on the local economy. But for our good quality land, using 2 acres is a reasonable number to use. Now, if we jump down to consider the economic activity of a solar lease, we essentially have the lease payments on an annual basis to the landowner. We know that we need approximately 5 to 7 acres to generate 1 megawatt with solar. And we know that there's pilot payments made to the taxing jurisdictions, a payment in lieu of taxes, that some might argue are, it is a source of revenue into the municipalities. We could argue about how that acts as an economic activity. We could also argue about an economic multiplier for that income. So in other words, should we credit an economic multiplier for that landowner who receives income? Well, I think this could vary widely. If that landowner takes the money they generate from leasing their land and goes and buys a winter home in Florida, then that really has no impact on our local economy. However, if they invest that money locally, then we could say that there's some level of economic multiplier there. But in this example we used here, we can see that I think these are very fair numbers, and we can see that even in this case, that the economic activity to the community from solar is a little less than half of what would be generated by a dairy cow. Now on the right-hand side, we look at what the landowner's options. So given some of these values, we see that the landowner supporting that dairy cow while they're generating a lot of money into the local community it's not netting a lot of money per acre, right? The net per acre after they've covered the cost of the farm can be fairly low, and in fact in some recent years we know it's been negative. A landowner that's not actively farming may rent or lease their land to another farmer, and that value can vary a lot. It goes from $0 to $100 in around the county, but we can use 80 as a value to think about. And then we see that both of those numbers really pale in comparison to the money per acre that a landowner could realize from leasing to solar. So we have to be respectful of that even though it's not as good for the economy, it could be a real benefit to an individual landowner. So keeping that in consideration, we'll switch back over to the other slides. And we have to continue to think about how this impacts our community. And it really is a balancing act, because we know that our dairy farms have been stressed financially in recent years. And perhaps the irony of this is, even when they're not profitable, they spend every dollar they make to support their farm and keep the cows healthy and fed and keep the crops growing. So they're contributing significant dollars to the local economy even when they're not profitable. But obviously this isn't a sustainable business model, and this is something we have to consider. So for a farmer to diversify their income and lease some land to solar, while it may decrease the overall revenue that's generated in the local economy, it could actually benefit their business and help them stay in business when milk prices are low. we also have to realize that there's a big difference between a farm developing their own land onto solar and having that income to help support their farming operation versus a landowner who used to lease their land to a farm leasing it for solar. Because in that case, that can have really significant impacts on the farms, as if there's no way they can afford to pay the same amount of money as a solar lease to rent the land for crops. However, if that land's taken away from them, it could really put them at a competitive disadvantage in their business, forcing them to drive further to replace that land or bring poorer production land back into practice to replace it, in which case they would need more acres to generate the same amount of crops. So as we think about this, there's no real right answer. However, with dairy being a major driver of our economy, we do have to consider uh, a critical mass of farms needed to maintain that. And that's not only the land needed to support those farms, but also all of the other jobs that are generated in our local area supporting those farms, both on the input side, whether it's an equipment dealer or an advisor or a technical service provider, or if it's on the processing side in terms of processing all of that milk and the jobs that generates. And if we allow too much land to be developed, our agricultural industry will not be competitive, and we will lose that critical infrastructure and all those jobs that support it. So we have to really consider the implications of the land that we allow to be developed and how much land we can develop without hurting our industry, and also which land. Obviously, we would really prefer to develop our less productive agricultural lands because they already are, less sustainable, and really protect our best agricultural lands because they're going to provide the best economic and environmental sustainability to our dairy industry. So thank you for your time, and here's my contact information if you have any questions and would like to reach out or need clarification on anything.